of lower middle class, and I feel like I have to fight every day to keep it. I don't feel like it's something that I take for granted, and I don't think that it's something that, I will absolutely be able to pass on to my kids. You know what I mean? At least at the stage that I'm at, I think
but that's as you notice in the book, in the beginning, in the earlier chapters, I talk about how a lot of scholars use lower middle class, middle class, and upper middle class. I don't make that demarcation. Either you in the middle class or you not. I don't care where you are in the middle class. Either you're in it or not. That's how I decide to demarcate middle classness.
Right. Yeah, I feel you. I think myself as well, too. I think the difference, I guess, in how I feel about it and how you express it in the book is that, to me, I attach the finances a little bit more than it does in the book. But I mean, honestly, you're right, though. I mean, just the access to the different groups, I mean, that attains a middle class status. But I guess with me being a married man, I attach the finances to it, because not only do I have to, make sure that I'm able to get into these circles, but my kids and my wife as well, too.
Yes.
So so that budget is just a little bit more. I mean, do you think that, being single and without kids is easier to attain middle class status?
I don't know that I would say it's easier. It's just a different set of issues that you have to deal with. Right. So one lady in the book, and I can't remember her name. I think her name was Nancy, but don't quote me on that. She talked about when she was going to buy a home, because she was going to buy a home as a single person, there was extra scrutiny that she had to deal with. And if she would have had a partner, maybe they wouldn't have had the same level of scrutiny trying to figure out where all of her money and down payment came from. Right. So I think that there's certain kind of like discriminatory factors that singles have to deal with. Right. But I also think just because what's really baffling to me is that people, again, I am Black marriage. I am all about marriage, right, and Black marriage in particular. But it's baffling how people think that marriage is just a panacea. If I can just get married, all of my social issues and the social ills will go away. Marriage doesn't work like that. Nope. If you have two people that are highly in debt, that get married, that does not catapult you into middle class status. You just got a whole bunch of debt in your household now. So marriage doesn't automatically catapult you into middle class status. And so it's very important that we keep having that conversation, because I think single folks may have a misnomer or may not have a clear view about marriage, right, and about what marriage can and cannot do to you, and right, how it could catapult you into middle class status, but it can also catapult you into a lower status as well. Exactly. And I think what really would help single folks is if married people were really more honest. Right. One of the conversations I've had with people since the book has come out is they've said, once I get married, then married people get real honest about marriage, but they're not real honest with single folks beforehand. I would admonish married folks to be really honest with your single friends about marriage, because we don't know. And because we don't know, we just think it's like this euphoria, this great place we're trying to get to. But marriage got some issues. Being married can have some issues, and it can definitely have financial implications for those. It does not automatically make things easier financially because there's two people in the household.
No, not at all. It's actually two different sets of problems, or and I don't want to say problems, I'll say challenges, because it's a better word for what they are. But it presents two different sets of challenges. Me and Monique, we've been married for 16 years, and I mean, we have a beautiful marriage, but we have put in a whole lot of work for it to be like that, and we continue to put in work every day. We've had our ups, we've had our downs, and to be honest with you, the thing that's made it stronger is the fact that we got over a lot of those things. Being married is not for the meek. The first couple of years are really rough, where you kind of filling out each other's barriers and what you will and what you don't do, because you kind of get over that honeymoon stage where it's all, I don't know the word for it, where, because it always starts out really good and stuff. And then when you get down to the really nitty gritty of trying to balance budgets and things like that, and the kids and flip flop these things. And then you have things that go on in life with your family and their family and intermixing in-laws. And, it can be very rewarding, but it's work.
Right. it is work.
It's work. People laugh at me because we have a single friend, and that person dates married people. And they were like, I can't believe they date married people, but I always joke, I'm like, they don't want a whole person, they just want a half a person. They want somebody to have fun with and then go home. It's like, you know what I mean? That's the relationship that they want to have. I mean, I guess, however ethical or unethical or morally, unsound we might think it is. I mean, that's their choice, but and not to take it, too much out of context, but if that's their choice, that's what they're happy with, and that's what they understand. It's fine. It's just when people expect something different, I had a friend who was dating a married person, and then they were mad when that person didn't leave their spouse, and it was like, so, which brings me to my next question. Do you think a lot of this is about people not wanting to be lonely?
Well, okay. I think it could be that. But I also think in the book, I don't think I'm saying anything that's brand new. I'm just giving name to it, or I'm giving you some context to understand it a little bit better. Right. And similar to the question of why do you want to be married or why do you want to be partnered? I asked the question, why do you think you're going to be alone, or why are you afraid of being alone? I think social institutions and social media have done a really good job of having people think, oh my gosh, I'm going to die alone and no one's going to find me for a whole week in my house. And it's fear. So now you're getting people to partner and be in relationships out of fear, as opposed to other things that might matter. It's like, well, I don't want to be alone, so I'll just partner with somebody.
Right.
So I think we're just told to be fearful, but more importantly, and it may sound as if I'm not pro marriage, but I really am. But why do you think if you're married, someone's going to show up for you?
Right.
Just because you're married doesn't mean you're going to show up for you. In fact, there's some data that's suggesting that spouses are leaving their spouses, especially when they get sick, because they just don't know how to navigate they're having a sick spouse. So they leave. So I think what's really important, and I'm not married, so I'm coming at this from a single perspective, and some of the research that I've read, based on some of the research that I have read and what the literature is suggesting. I think what's really important is that we need to think about our non-romantic nurturing relationship, also known as friends. Your friends are going to show up for you when your spouse may or may not. And what happens a lot of times is that married folks put all of their eggs in the marriage basket. And because they put all of their eggs in the marriage basket, they no longer cultivate relationships with their friends. And then they find themselves returning back to singlehood because of widowed, separation, or divorce. And they don't know how to navigate, and they don't know how to live because they put all their eggs in their marriage basket. Yeah. So I think it's really, and this also dovetails with some of the research that some of my colleagues have done on never married households being slightly happier as they age, because they have friends for different things. They have friends to go to church with, to go golfing with, to go out and have dinner with. So they've built a whole network. So as they age, they're actually not lonely. They tend to be happier is what the data is suggesting, because they have a network. But married folks only navigate with their partner and navigate life with their partner, and they leave their friends by the wayside. And then if they find themselves returning back to singlehood, they simply just don't know how to navigate anymore. So alone, I think, is a fear that the social media and social institutions have tried to institutionalize and lead us to make certain decisions about, because we don't want to be alone. But we're really not alone. We are in relationships. They simply just may not be a non-romantic nurturing relationship. And it's important that we give as much credit to those non-romantic relationships as we do to the romantic ones.
Agreed.
That's a long answer to a very short question.
No, but that's how the book was. And I'm telling you, that's why I really, really enjoyed it, because it just really just took it just an extra step for me. And like I said, I mean, I never really think about how single people walk around here, but I have plenty of friends that really, really do struggle with this. And I didn't really realize that was their struggle. Kind of, I don't know. Some of the friends that I've had, they've been my friends for 25 years, so I know them. But in the last like 10 years or so, and that's I've noticed a change in them, kind of, in their perkiness. And I think that's it. I think it's everybody, being always asking them, well, why are you single? You're a handsome man, or you're a pretty, woman, and you have it going on, good job, you got your own place, especially one of my friends. I mean, he could get women with no problem, but he's just not married. And I think people get on him about that all the time, and you probably get tired of hearing that in your 40s. Right. Which, brings me to, I was reading. Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to say something real quick. I don't know if you're gonna touch on this, then we can wait. But there's two things about that I wanted to say.
Sure.
One, I wanted to talk to the single people, and then two, I want to talk to a slightly broader audience. So for the single people that might be listening on the call, or for the people who have single people in their family, when someone says something to you like, "Oh, why aren't you married? Oh, why didn't you have children?" And it's unfortunate because what happens is like during the holidays and stuff, single folks have to get their whole narrative together before they walk into the door. It's like, okay, because the question's going to happen. And so I would admonish people like the single folks, when someone says that, I think a really easy way to kind of to get them to think about what they're saying is to say, well, what do you mean by that?
Right.
And that is a benign way for them to think about the error in their statements. I also think, you said what?
I said, I think that's good too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because, you could be like, you could read them or cuss them out from Amazing Grace to How Sweet It Is if you want to, because you're so exhausted from hearing that question over and over again. Right. But then say, well, what do you mean by that? So what's probably going to happen, the first thing they're going to do is like, oh, or they're going to stutter or stammer over their words. But I think you keep pushing back. So it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, you're so smart and you're so pretty. Well, what do you mean by that? It's like, you just need somebody. Well, what do you mean by that? Keep doing that until they realize, I'm like, you have negated everything else that I have accomplished. And you're only looking at me on whether or not I have an MRS degree or not.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Right. And that's it, right? It's like, or like, these young men, it's like, okay, well, maybe it's time for you to slow down and find somebody. Why do you think that single men are out here in these streets, hoeing in the streets? It's short-sighted. So it forces people to kind of think about what they're saying and what they mean. So what do you mean by that? But I also think if we're going to ask the question, let's ask the question of everybody. If you're going to ask me, why am I single? We should be asking married people, why are you married? Right. And wait for a coherent response. Simply to say, because that's my boo, I love them. No, I'm going to need a little bit more coherency. If I have to explain in a full dissertation why I am single, you're going to have to give me a dissertation as to why you're married.
Exactly. I agree with you. Because I'm married because I met Monique. Because I met my wife. We got married when I was 31 years old. So I was single my whole 20s. And I had never I hadn't really gave any thought, either way to whether getting married or not. But I simply got married because I met my wife, and she felt like marriage material to me. You know what I mean, though? And that's it. I had dated plenty of women before that, but it was just because of her. I didn't have any grand scheme of getting married or anything. I did know that if I wanted to have kids, I wanted to have them by the same woman, but that still wasn't really like a driving force, because a lot of people are bad at marriage. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who are not good at marriage. I've seen a lot of people who are in very bad marriages. And if for me, if it was like that, I'd rather be single.
Right.
So, but I mean, I don't know. That's me. And I'll be honest with you, though. I did do a lot of research, and there's not a lot of people. There are a lot of people who really do it, appreciate your ideal of, Sala, but there are some people who are, just, not for it. You know what I mean? I saw one, I guess it was like a Twitter post that was talking about with the Sala lifestyle, and people being childless, that it wouldn't be a generation for there wouldn't be any transfer of wealth from generation to generation. So they talk about the discussion of the future as meaningless. I mean, this gets into, like I said, about the generational immobility, or chapter 7 that we were talking about, with single people that are middle class and having this wealth and nobody to give it to. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So Yes, I think some people are going to push back, and some people are going to say, like, "Oh, Dr. Marsh is just a bitter Black woman, or Dr. Marsh has been abused by a black man, or this, that, or the other." People cannot wrap. It's really hard for people to wrap their mind around somebody being single and being okay with their singleness, and that just tells me that this whole idea about being married is an albatross, or it's an anchor around people's necks, and it's hard to have the conversation because we default to every social institution pushes us to wanting to be married and needing to be partnered. So thinking about it from a wealth perspective and an intergenerational mobility perspective, in some ways, now just go with me for a second. In some ways, the Love Jones cohort, or people that are single and living alone, they have way more flexibility in how they can help build the Black middle class or the next generation